Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. We thank GoFan and VNN, the exclusive sponsors of the UIAAA Connection. Now operating as one combined company, GoFan and VNN offer a seamless experience through digital ticketing and athletic websites. They make it easy to direct fans to one central place for schedules, communication, and tickets for both home and away events. We appreciate GoFan and VNN for their continued support and exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest, Keith Morioka, Certified Athletic Administrator, retired from the state of Hawaii. Kiki, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Let's have you begin by sharing with our international audience where you grew up, where you went to college, your first job, etc.
Well, I was born and raised in Hawaii. We weren't really well-to-do, but it was comfortable. I went to high school at Iolani School, which is a private school. I was given the opportunity. They gave me a scholarship, and I was able to go. I went to the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and then I started teaching at Waipahu High School, which was my very first teaching opportunity. And then I went to Hana, Maui. If you know anything about the islands, Hana is the most isolated area that you could be a teacher at. It's way out in the boonies.
Your second high school was at Hana?
Hana, yeah. And after Hana, I became the executive director on the Big Island.
All right. Well, let me ask you this, because I've taken the road to Hana. I'm hoping that you actually lived in Hana when you taught there, and you didn't have to take the road there and back every day.
I did live on campus, but I did drive that road at least once a week, having to go to meetings and athletic events. So yeah, there's a song, 54 Bridges to Hana Town.
Well, let me ask you this. Like I say, I've only been there once. We went to Hana, we had lunch there, and then we went further down the road to if my memory serves me correct, the 7 pools. Is that correct?
Yes, 7 sacred pools.
Okay, and I looked at the map, and I think the road kept going. You could go back the other way, but I had to rent a car, and I didn't dare because I didn't know the state of the road. Do people travel that part of the road, or does all the traffic pretty much stay on that main road to Hana?
They normally turn around after they reach Kaupo, but you can go completely around. It depends on the weather. If you had a big storm like we just had, some of the road would have been washed away, so it would be kind of dangerous to go completely around. But yeah, you are able to go completely around the island.
Is that part that's less traveled, is that paved, or is that a dirt road?
I don't know if it's paved yet, but when I was living there, it wasn't paved.
Okay, and did you take that road a lot, or did you take the scenic one with all the bridges that all the tourists take? Or is that a better road to take, or because I don't know?
Yeah, I just went around on that road maybe about 3 times in the 3 years that I was in Hana. Other than that, I'd go from Hana on the north side of the island to Wailuku, Kahului, and those places.
But let me ask you this on the subject: is that's a fairly wide. Are people just careful? Like, obviously we were careful when we drove it. Is there a lot of accidents, or people are just Because you can't speed a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of accidents on that road.
They do have one because it's a supposedly a scenic route. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, the tourists especially, they drive slower and they're looking around at the sites. So sometimes they're looking too long at, rather than paying attention to the road where there's a turn, and they'll
Right.
get into accidents. And people laugh when I tell them, when I first moved there, the locals would tease me that I was driving too slow. And I was doing like 35 and 40 miles an hour on certain sections of the road. But when you knew that most of the bridges are uh, kind of in the valley, as you go winding around. So the trick was to look on the other side of the valley to see if there's a car coming towards the bridge. And so you sped up to beat that car to the bridge because there were two signs, one on each side of the bridge. One said, um, let me see, one said to, well, all of a sudden my lapse, but one said to give up the right of way.
Uh-huh.
The other side said give up the right of way to oncoming cars. Now, who has the right of way?
Yeah. Did they
The
both say the
guy,
same thing?
yeah, they're both saying the same thing. So people in Hana taught me you speed up to beat the other car so that you're there first. So sometimes I'm
That's
going
awesome.
down the hill, down towards the bridge. I'm doing about 45 miles an hour.
Yeah, well, that is awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that because I know some of our listeners have been on that road and it's famous. If you go to Maui, they tell you you've got to go take that road at least once. And I do remember, I don't think there's a whole lot of restaurants there, but I think we sat down, Deb and I, and had a burger and fries looking right over the ocean right when we got to Hana. So
Yeah,
that was a
that's
nice trip.
one nice places. And the other
Tell
thing
me,
is, I
yeah,
tell
go ahead.
people not to be a tourist while they're driving in and out of Hana, because a lot of people get nauseous because they're looking on the side and everything's going by and you get dizzy and you get
Uh-huh.
nauseated. I tell people pretend that you're the driver and looking forward at as you're driving, and only
Yeah,
do the sightseeing when you stop.
that's that's a good point. Tell me, Kiki, were you able to participate in a lot of youth sports growing up in Hawaii?
Oh yeah, yeah. When I was growing up, when I was about 9 years old, I started playing in the PAL League, the Police Activities League. I'm sure they have that nationwide, where the police are involved in athletic activities. So I
Right.
played from when I was in a 9 year old and played baseball and some basketball. So yeah, while I was growing up, there was a lot of sports that you could get into.
What made you decide, Kiki, once you graduated from the university, that you wanted to get into coaching and athletic administration?
You know, um, when I was still in college, my cousin was asked to coach the university high junior varsity baseball team, and he asked me to be his assistant. And this was, I think, I was a junior in college, and I enjoyed myself so much coaching these young athletes that I said, I want to be a coach. So I thought to myself, what's the best way to become a coach? And the answer was to be a teacher. Then you're there. You can interact with the kids while they're in school, and then you can coach them. And that's the route that I took. And I never looked
Perfect.
back.
That's awesome. Kiki, share with our audience some of the mentors and leaders you've had in your life that have made a difference to you.
Uh, the person that comes to mind at the top of my list, I think I have like three people that I consider mentors. Masayona Mine was the athletic coach and athletic director at Waipahu High School, my first uh, school that I taught and coached at. And he had a real gruff exterior. I thought he was really mean. I played when I was in high school. My other mentor, Eddie Hamada, was his best friend, and we played them in high school, a baseball game. We had a scrimmage, and when we were at the water fountain talking to my other teammates, and I said, I'm glad I'm never ever gonna play for that man. He is too mean. He ended up becoming one of my mentors.
That's awesome.
And he was also the best friend of the athletic director at the Iolani School where I attended, and they were the exact opposites. They went to high school together, they went to college together, and they were the exact opposite. And they both became mentors for me in that they kind of, by example, they showed me the different leadership styles.
Okay.
Masu was at Waipahu High School, which was a tough community. I mean, Filipino Samoans, a lot of fights at the school. Now there's a lot of gang-related things, but so he had to be one of those really tough guys. Eddie Hamada, on the other hand, was gentle. He didn't have to be because it was a private school, and the kids are not supposed to act up, at a private school. So these two guys I consider them my mentors as far as the athletic side. And then my third person I consider a mentor is this Milton Shishiro. He became the principal at Waipahu High School. And when I became the athletic director at the school, he helped guide me in helping in my decision making and my leadership style. So those few people are pretty much the mentors that I consider.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Kiki. Let me ask you a little bit of a personal question here. What's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, that one is something that I always talk about to people, and it was when I made the decision to retire. I did it not because I wanted to, but because I was upset with a person. The situation was this person became the president of our league on the Big Island. I was the executive director, and the person said, well, I don't sign blank checks. So I said, well, I always need to write checks to the official organization that, the various organizations and to whoever. So will you be around whenever I need checks to be signed? And the person said, yes. So one day I needed some checks signed. I called, and the person said, come to the school at 4:30. I went there at 4:30. All the gates to the building were closed. So I left. I called the next day, and the person said, well, why didn't you call me? That was the attitude of that person. I said, I don't need this.
Yeah.
I don't need to put up with something like this, so I'm just going to retire. This friend of mine who was a state athletic specialist um, at the time, I don't know if you remember him. All of a sudden I forget his name, but he's one of my best friends, and he said you should not have retired. You should not have conceded. You should have stood up to that person, and that's what I um, try to tell people now. If something happens that is not to your liking or to your expectations, um, don't just give up. Find a way to overcome. And so that's what I learned from that.
Well, hindsight is 2020, so that's a good lesson for all of us to learn. Kiki, talk for a minute now how you became involved in HIADA, and then of course later then in the NIAAA, which is obviously how I first met you.
Well, when you became an athletic director in Hawaii, it was kind of a given that you're going to be a part of HIADA, which is the Hawaii Interscholastic Athletic Directors Association. And we have our annual meetings, so you become a member and you're um, always involved in HIADA. I wasn't that involved other than being a member. And then that state athletic specialist, his name was Dwight Toyama. I think he met Dwight.
Right, I know Dwight.
So Dwight's a good friend, and he appointed me to the National Federation Coaches or Athletic Directors Committee.
Mm-hmm.
And as a member of that, Frank Kowaleski was at that time, they didn't have the NIAAA. NIAAA was just a subgroup of the NFHS.
Right.
I think you remember that. And so Frank was the in charge of the NIAAA, and he was also the chair, the first supervisor for uh, the committee that I was on. And it just so happened that somebody was getting off the committee. So as a member of the athletic directors committee, he appointed me to represent the committee on the board. And that's how I became a member of the NIAAA board. And, that was the best experience of my life. I think people, when they look at what I did then, I didn't do very much. I thought that, I'm just going to sit back and watch, because I was in awe of all of these NIAAA board members. And that was a mistake. I should have, I gave in some input, but not enough, I think. And so I regret that. And Bruce Whitehead was a secretary at that time,
Right.
secretary to the board. And so I've known Bruce ever since then. So this was what, in the 90s. That's how far back we go. Maybe this was in the 80s. I think.
No,
So,
I think it was probably the late 90s. I think when I
Midnight.
came to my first HIADA conference, maybe in 98 or 99. I think you were a member of the board then, when I first met you.
I became a member, yeah.
Because I just remember you had the blue coat, and I said, I'm gonna be like Kiki one day and get one of those blue coats. So speaking of the board of directors, go ahead.
You can have mine. It doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah, neither does mine. Do you have any memories or specific stories about the time you were on the board?
Oh yeah, you know, it was it was when I was on the board that I met Bob Open. You
Sure,
know,
sure.
we were. I was. Do you remember in Indianapolis? There was the hotel that we stayed at was a converted train station
Yes, yes.
right next to the dome. You know, but
Uh-huh.
I was outside during a break. I was outside uh, smoking a cigar, and Bob's a cigar smoker too. So he came out, happened to come out, and he was going to smoke a cigar, and he said, "Hey, try one of these." And was one of those short, skinny, cowboy-looking cigars, and
Okay.
he gave it to me, and I started smoking that for a while. And after that, we became good friends, and he's been over to my house a few times. And for the longest time, while I was attending the conference, um, would you believe? Do you remember that they had a Hawaiian flag in the New Jersey hospitality room?
I do remember that, yes.
We were adopted by New Jersey because of Bob.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Now, this next question, I don't want to leave anybody out, but I'm sure I will. But I want you to talk about the Hawaii legends, of which you're one. But the people that I've known since I first started coming to the Hawaii conference, and I've probably been to 7 or 8 of them over the years. You're talking Irv Kau, Coach Don, Blane Gleason, Mel Imai, Herbie Lloyd, Ricky. Talk about these great people from Hawaii, and what a pleasure it is to be able to work with them and learn from their leadership.
Well, we'll start with Irv, although we should start with the oldest person, Coach Don. Coach Bo has
Okay.
been talking. But Irv was the very first Hawaii athletic director. No, I take that back. He was the second um, Hawaii athletic director to be really involved in the National Federation and the NIAAA, because Irv was on one of the early NIAAA boards, as I remember. You know. In fact, he was the very first Hawaii person on the NIAAA board. There was a Ralph Martinson who was a longtime Punahou School athletic director who was also involved in a lot of National Federation committees, but of course we didn't have the NIAAA at that time. Now then we come to Coach Bo, Coach Don Bothello. He is the oldest living legend of Hawaii athletics uh, in the state of Hawaii. Uh, I you know I kind of consider him as a mentor also, because he is not one of them who wants to come to the forefront and tell everybody what to do, what he can do, what he has done, but he kind of sits back, which is kind of the Hawaii style, to be very low key and not be noticed. But he's always there to support any athletic director or anybody who wants to be a part of athletics. He's got a lot of stories. He was the quarterback on the University of Hawaii team that beat Nebraska way back in, was it the 50s? I think it
Hmm.
was. But he was the quarterback then. And, but he never boasts about that. You always got to prod him, and
Sure.
to get him, tell him the stories about that. Then the next person is Blane Gleason.
Yeah.
Blane is one of my idols. He's much younger than I am, but he's one of my idols. Played in the NFL, and he's another one who does not push himself, kind of like Coach Bull, and he kind of wants to be in the background. In fact, when he received the uh, Distinguished Service Award and what is that other one? But he received those two awards, and I was real proud of him. And he said, Kiki, I didn't want these awards, but at that time he was on the NIAAA board. He
Right.
just off of the board. I'm not sure, but Bruce Bruce told him, "You will accept these awards." And he said, yeah, I guess I have to. But Blane is another one of them who does not want to be up there, up front, being recognized. He wants to be in the background. Then we come to Mel. Mel is, he's a good friend. We're the same age. He's very hardworking. Always has his camera with him to take pictures so that people have memories of what they did. Whether it was attending conferences, just being an athletic director, but Mel was always there in support of whatever anybody was doing. And you mentioned Herbie Lloyd. That brings back memories,
I haven't seen Herbie in probably, I'll bet I haven't seen Herbie in 15 years, but I remember all those good times when I first met him and when we were all younger years ago.
Yeah, whenever he had the chance, he always had a beer in his hand. He always had a big smile on his face, always laughing. You know, uh, he made going to conferences fun. I used to love to hang around with Herbie. So, but yeah, those are memories of those people.
And I have to now, I have to do this because these gentlemen are going to listen to this podcast and think that I forgot them. I forgot to mention uh, board members Greg VanCanfort and Darren Oshiro. So speak about them for a moment.
Greg, I've known for a long time. He's he's always been a big supporter of athletics. Um, I didn't get to hang out with Greg too often because we were, of course, different sides of the island. And then I got to know him a lot better when I was on Maui and when we went to the different conferences and stuff. But Darren, I really haven't gotten to know very well, other than recently when I was still involved with HIADA. Uh, Being on a different island, you don't get to talk to people very often. So,
Sure.
yeah, Darren is the youngest and the latest addition to our uh, organization, and so I didn't really get to know Darren very well.
We talk about the NIAAA family, and I think a lot of our listeners understand what that's like. But I want to speak to you about two specific instances. I know when I was in Hawaii 18 months ago, uh, we were there for the NEDC, and then a bunch of the executive directors went on a cruise. And I know that when we were on the Big Island, there over in Hilo, that the Godfather hung out with you for the day. Um, and then I remember just recently, my good friend Jeff Kurtz told me that he was able to visit with you just a few weeks ago when he was visiting Hawaii. I want you to talk about that's part of the NIAAA that people that don't see. It's not part of the organization. It's those friends that you make, and then you're able to see them outside of the workplace. Just talk about that for a moment.
That's I remember that. When Bob went on the cruise and the cruise of course stopped in Hilo and then
Right.
stopped in Kona after
Uh-huh.
the day after. So I took him around the Big Island, and I told him, hey, you know, if there's anybody else who wants to come with us, I've got a Ford Expedition that seats 9. But he said, oh, everybody said that they got their own things that they wanted to do. So I said, okay. So Bob and I just did the tourist thing, and then when the cruise ship docked in Kona, I drove over, picked Bob up, and you know uh, we went around, did the tourist thing. So it's I if anybody should come to the Big Island, if they come to Hilo, just give me a call, and I'll be more than happy to take people around. That's the aloha spirit. I think everybody who's whether you're a good friend or just an acquaintance, um, people over here are more than willing to you know to take you around, to show you maybe hopefully some of the places that people don't normally go to.
Sure.
This last trip with Jeff, uh, we found that they started charging for admissions into the parks that we've been going to. They like to go to the waterfalls, Akaka Falls, and
Right.
they charge for parking now, or entry into the park. And let me see, was it Akaka Falls or Rainbow Falls? I think it was Akaka Falls. Um, you'd walk maybe 30 yards to the viewing site, and they charge you for that. I thought, and you know, when I told Jeff, he said, "Isn't that ridiculous to walk 30 yards and you got to pay an entry fee?" I think in that sense, I think Hawaii is kind of, I guess that's where the shortcoming is. You know, if there was a long walk like when you go to Rainbow Falls, I'm sorry,
Right.
Akaka Falls is the long walk. Rainbow Falls is a short one. If you have that long trail that you're going to go to, I can see, charging admission, but not for something where you're going to walk 20, 30 yards. Yeah.
Sure. I remember Hilo, one of my early visits to Hawaii years and years ago. You remember Ken Yamazi, and
Yes.
I had gotten to know Ken, before he passed on. But he apparently his mother or someone in his family was in the business of growing orchids, and he gave me the address, and so we were able to go there. And boy, they took us around and they showed us how they grow them and all these greenhouses. It was right. It was probably up the coast from north of Hilo. I want to know maybe somewhere between 5 to 15 miles. But I just thought that was fascinating because that's something that I would have, never seen here in Utah and never been able to see if I hadn't known Ken. So you live in such a pretty place, and so can't thank you enough for all of your hospitality for all the times I've been there, and all of us that are listeners, the times we've been there. Let's finish up with a couple of questions, Kiki. The first one being this: you've got 2 suggestions for a brand new athletic administrator, and they need to follow Kiki's suggestions in order to become a success. What would your 2 suggestions be?
Well, kind of, the first thing that I feel is very important for a new athletic director is to learn about as much as you can about your school, about your league, and about your state association. Don't just think Make sure that by reading up on it, know what the policies of your association is, know you can and cannot do at the school work. So this is, I think, is very important. And I didn't realize it until later how important it is that AD should become involved with the NIAAA somehow.
Mhm.
I thought just going to conferences would be sufficient, but you don't get to know what the NIAAA is really all about until you get involved. Apply to be on a committee, you know, get involved in that, all of these things. Look, you know, to me, that's very important. And they got to attend the conference. I've seen so many athletic directors in the state of Hawaii who have never been to conferences, national conferences. They'll go to the state conferences, but not the national conferences. And that kind of limits your vision, you know, and you don't learn anything. It's like being at home. You learn
Yeah.
everything that you do at home, but unless you travel, you don't see what it's like. So I think that's important that they do that. And my third would be never stop learning. Never think you know everything, you know. Keep on learning, ask questions and get involved. So those are the things that I feel very important.
Perfect. Great suggestions. Thanks for sharing that. We'll finish with this, Kiki. What questions should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
I don't think there are any questions that you didn't ask that you know you should have. If I might add, you know, when you mentioned Ken Imase,
Uh-huh.
he was the one who supplied the flag for our adoption
That
into
is
the
awesome.
New Jersey, and then I I can't remember. I think it was when he passed that Bob gave it back to me. So
Huh.
they had the flag that long.
Well, that's awesome. That is awesome. On that note, that wraps up this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been Keith Morioka, Certified Athletic Administrator, retired in Hawaii from the HIADA and from the NIAAA. Kiki, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.